again with Pat McGuigan. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Why is there a rift in the Oklahoma House GOP?
There's a lot of subsets to the term Republican, especially in the Oklahoma legislature, and some of it is a matter of emphasis, not necessarily of underlying belief systems. We've talked about this some in the past in this segment. What's going on is the play out of the decision by Republican leadership, House, Senate, and the governor to emphasize economic development issues and not pay as much attention to social issues or some other contentious issues. Whether you agree with it or not, that was their decision. So the Republican caucus, you know, my goodness, almost 750 almost members, a lot of people. And so there's a lot of opportunity for individuals and for groups to band together and, you know, cause trouble. Or you could say cause trouble, or you could say fight for their beliefs, things they believe in. It's played itself out on some education policy issues where the people actually agree with the policy objective that's trying to be achieved by the Republican leadership, but they band together with the Democrats and vote as a bloc to deprive that measure of the emergency clause. Now, in the last week, the truth is that House Speaker Kris Steele has been able to put together most of his emergency clause victories, and or he's been able to prevail on the merits. A real good example would be on lawsuit reform, enacting a so-called hard cap on non-economic damages. It lost in the first round this week, and 24 hours later he was able to cobble enough votes together to win 57-40. Now that's short of the emergency clause, but he got his policy objective and sent it on to the Senate. The really divisive fight this past week, though, and it was pretty intriguing to watch, and I did watch the debate from up in the gallery, was over the reprimands of two state representatives, and the most significant one personally, I think, being the reprimand of Randy Terrill, who's under investigation by the Oklahoma County DA. And what he was under reprimand for was some pretty vile things that it has said in a sworn affidavit that he said about Speaker Steele. It really created some cleavages that don't go simply right, left, or moderate, or Democrat, Republican, but go to issues of proper behavior in a legislative body, a legislative setting, legislative office, public settings for that matter, versus free speech. And that was so fascinating. It was 34 to reprimand him, 30 against, and then 30 members taking constitutional privilege and not voting. It was divisive, but the division was across party lines and across the whole legislature. So it's not quite a rift in the Republican Party. It's a time of dramatic change, and you have some players. I think Terrill might accurately be called a faction of one, because I would not assign to any of the other Republican members who have been disenchanted the same kind of motivations that Randy Terrill has. He's sui generis, as they say. The Republicans and Democrats that have worked with him on some issues, it's because it's a way for them to assert themselves on some things they're frustrated about.
Now, what about the new conservative effort for corrections reform called Right on Crime?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it comes in a context. And the context is this incredibly challenging budget situation and basically annual requests by the Corrections Department for additional resources. What you've got is at least the third wave in my professional lifetime, and it may be more than that, but at least the third wave of people left, right, and center talking seriously about creating alternatives to incarceration. And Right on Crime is taking place in Oklahoma, and it's a spin-off of national activism that in some ways is led by a very significant group called Prison Fellowship and Justice Fellowship. Evangelical-based organization having a very caring attitude towards people who are incarcerated. Here in Oklahoma, you now have that presence, but then you also have groups that couldn't be called conservative or liberal necessarily, like the Education and Employment Ministry in Oklahoma City and Women in Recovery in Tulsa, a really laudatory group doing excellent work. And what they're seeking is ways to take crimes that are not directly violent but are still, problems and crimes, and deal with them in different ways. A lot of this has already happened in Texas and has been very successful, and now Oklahoma is going to be modeling on that. And the right on crime is the conservative side of that debate and that equation. But I think you're going to have surprising agreement across the spectrum in an effort to get a handle. The pragmatic side is the cost. The principled side is doing a better job of dealing with people on the inside so that prison is not a graduate school for crime. Instead, it's preparation for a better life when you get out.
Yeah, we did a story, the Oklahoma Impact Team has looked at this issue, and Speaker Steele is very passionate about reform.
Kris Steele is a pivotal figure in Oklahoma history on this issue. Now, that's kind of a dramatic thing to say, but I believe it. He got ahead of the curve and was talking about this in creative ways long before others, and now a whole lot of other people are on board, and he deserves a lot of credit for joining the issue in a timely way and being ready to have the discussion.
All right, thanks so much for joining us this morning. If you want to check out Pat's website, just go to CapitolBeatOK.com.